Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to WCS EU Challenger. We are hopping back into Group B for our second match of the day. My name is Fear Dragon. I am joined by In Control now. How you doing this morning?
Doing good. Doing good. Feeling good. A lot of StarCraft. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're going to be hopping into that next match, which will begin our TvT journey in a group of 3 Terrans. Our next match is, of course, going to be, as mentioned before, souL versus uThermal. And, Jeff, I have a fun stat on this one.
Do it.
souL has not taken a competitive game, not series, competitive game versus uThermal in over a year and a half.
So you're telling me he's due?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that's a really good way to take it.
That's the way I choose to look at it.
Yeah. I will say souL has been one of those players that's definitely been on the up and up as of the past year. He's improved drastically this year versus past years. So I think this is probably his best opportunity.
Is it though? I mean, yeah, maybe. It's uThermal has always been a beast in TvT. He is, I think, currently holding kind of what is loosely considered to be still the best Terran in Europe right now. And TvT has been a little bit of his bread and butter since the beginning of time. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that goes down. Joking aside about souL being due, it becomes one of those really crazy things when someone has that dominant of a record against you. It's deeper than what we could ever speculate on. It's in your head. It's one of those things where you're like, well, I've tried this against him. He beat that. Then I've tried this. He beat that. So you go into this, and some players sometimes can actually undo all the practice they've got and start to kind of really, it becomes something else. So it's going to be interesting to see if souL can rise above that and face off against his nemesis here.
All right, we're going to be starting down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. On top of the red Terran player, it is souL from OSC Elite.
And his opponent, the top left-hand side, the Dutchman himself, Mr. uThermal. A sometimes Protoss player, as it were.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I had to double check in the WCS rulebook to see what were the rules on race swapping during the tournament versus between games, between series, etc. It is between series, and I had to check that because I know that uThermal's favorite Protoss versus whatever matchup when he plays Protoss is versus Terran. He is probably one of the dirtiest Protoss players out there when he's facing Terran. He is the shield battery in the natural, 40 of them with a proxy Stargate kind of player.
No, anytime a player off races, you'll always see what they perceive to be the most abusive thing possible. They'll just take it to the maximum. But he is going to go with the TvT here. We have a very different opening here, as we heard the ooh, because we got Mr. Thermy himself going for the fast CC. Okay, I was a little bit confused because he actually you had the barracks wireframe, and I was like, it's so large though. No, it's a command center. It is. So he's going to go with that fast expand, but that's not too unusual on Neon Violet Square because it's a very large map. So even if you are facing some of the faster builds out there, you're going to have a little bit more time to adjust.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about this map when you go for those kind of economic openings is that there's no Reaper hop-up spot from the outside of the map. It's not like a lot of the other maps where, oh, you can hop in from the natural or from this other little cliff area. It's just that natural expansion. So if you cover that area, you're usually pretty solid.
Yeah, and on the flip side, souL's just going to go with a pretty stock and normal opening here where the Reaper's just going to scout out. And then he's going to follow up with the factory, presumably a starport here. But it is just now the Reaper scouting, so it'll be the first time he sees what he is facing. I believe he did not SCV scout, but as I say this, there's a building going down across the map, and I love it. I think if you want to punish an orbital or a command center first, this is how you do it.
Yeah, 1-1-1 opening is, I mean, the starport's going to be finishing up before the factory for uThermal finishes up, so there's no way in hell that he's going to actually have a Cyclone done. He may have a Marine or two, but he's just making a second Reaper, which is something I've seen more in TvT, but this is just not going to work out.
No, well, we'll have to see. You're getting pretty, see, you're doing that the rookie caster mistake where you're getting all committed here, and I'm going to play it safe and do the $1 gambit where I'm like, you know what? It could or could not work out. And then I look smart because I'm like, I told you it could or could not work out.
Okay, well, first SCV is going to be going down to natural. This is not as bad of a situation. I like that uThermal has that bunker to help defend at least a little bit, but oh no, there's not actually a full ball off there.
Yeah, the second Reaper does pop out. It's going to try to help. These units are getting weathered down, so I think their damage is limited, but the way this functions is it slows down uThermal. It stops this economic juggernaut from really getting rolling. And then there comes that Liberator, and there's not much of an answer. As you were saying, Fear Dragon, the factory's actually not even finished. No, wait, that was, that was a different progress bar.
Yeah,
That's that.
You almost had it. You almost had it. You could have said, aha, told you, Fear Dragon, but...
See, now, in my so for my excuse, in my mind, it's like 2 a.m. 2 days ago, so I'm pretty wiped. But no, the Liberator's going to pop out here, and everything is getting spotted. So far, it is just that Liberator.
It goes in a very interesting path. It goes all the way to the south side of the map, looking to move into the natural, but this just means that uThermal has a lot more time to get up more units. I mean, the Viking is almost going to be done by this point.
Yeah, and that's, you know, not to read too far into it, but that is the kind of stuff that starts to happen to you a little bit. I mean, why build the starport there to circle all the way around over to the natural? As we can see, the answer was always here. There was always going to be that Cyclone, whether it went to the main or the natural, but as you said, Fear Dragon, it just took that much longer. And the Cyclone doesn't have the best anti-air, so it could have locked down a mineral line for a little bit longer. But when the Viking pops out, that's it. There's no more harass that's effectively going to be done by that.
Well, there's going to be a third base on the way over here for souL. He can take that nice, easy, tucked-away base. And, of course, in TvT, gas can oftentimes be a very important factor if you're going into, say, something like a mech composition, if you're building up Cyclones, and, heck, even if you just have something that's gas-intensive like Banshees coming out.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It is less minerals, though, and those are also pretty darn good in just about every matchup. So taking the pocket base is not that bad, but it's safe is, I think, the biggest nice thing about it. From there, you can take the fourth base and not have to... I mean, the third base, there's not like a tank angle where if you don't have vision, you're all of a sudden under siege. So it's nice defensively that way. And it's also good if you have the later expansion to go ahead and take the faster third to try and make up for the difference. We do see Cloak coming out for uThermal, though, and it's a little bit of a late Cloak. Well, I mean, anything is going to be late now because he went for an economic opening. But the nice thing about Banshees is they just kind of always have a pretty good presence in this matchup. You'll see Ravens come out early, and even with a Raven, the Banshee can still find... I mean, if it hits a mineral line, it'll kill 2 or 3 SCVs and then duck out at worst, usually.
Yeah, I think my favorite times that I get to see Banshees are when they actually keep the Banshees alive beyond just the early or even mid-game stages, and it goes in toward the lake end. The Banshees are still alive, and somehow it's just picking off siege tanks randomly. Those are the really, really impressive Banshee players. And I feel like I've seen uThermal be one of those players many times.
Oh, yeah. Banshee Viking is one of my favorite compositions to see done well. I think the Raven has kind of blotted out the sky a little bit at that stage of the game, so we'll see if we get to that place. But both players are squaring up towards Bio, I think. He says a little crook to his voice, because I'm not sure if uThermal's going that route, but certainly souL is. He's starting to kind of show his hand here. And I guess, you know what, to be honest, uThermal can go any direction from here. He's still kind of staying on that 1-1-1, and he's going to also take his pocket base, but here comes that Banshee.
Okay, might catch wind of this base. Just barely outside of vision range.
Yeah. I mean, if any mules get dropped here, they will get dead.
Wow, he really just didn't see it. I guess he sees the SCVs. That's enough of a reveal. And he is going to go after them, picking up a few free units. Doesn't have to worry about any kind of reinforcements coming anytime shortly, so just gets out of there for the free damage.
Yep, not bad. As you said, got the information and a little bit of damage. And that's the cool thing about the Banshee, is it just gets to kind of continuously do that. It forces out stacked defenses, so not a bad move here from uThermal. And I kind of like that uThermal's not committed to mech or bio, because he now gets to make that choice, seeing that this is what he's going to be dealing with. A lot of times, if you see bio, well, I don't know his preferences, but a lot of players will go towards mech. On a large map like this, it might be, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to be this like Terran expert, but I will tell you that on a large map, it's a little bit more complicated, I guess. If the map's congested, mech makes a lot of sense because you can block up the lanes and really get the AoE damage in there. Like on a large map, if bio gets a good concave against you and kind of comes in from multiple angles, mech gets a little bit more complicated, I guess.
Yeah, this is always a bit of a weird map when it comes to mech, because I feel like I do see it, and sometimes it's incredibly effective, and like you said, sometimes it just doesn't seem to go well at all.
Well, it's neither here nor there. They're both going to go bio. Marine tank also just a good army composition no matter what.
Okay, first Banshee in the main base is going to eventually end up falling there. The second Banshee out of energy, it will be taken out by the Marines, even dropping a couple more Marines from the high ground down over there. And souL can finally breathe a sigh of relief as he takes both of those out. But kind of funny enough, even though that third base did, yeah, I think you were mentioning this before, the third base that was planted near the pocket expansion doesn't actually go to the pocket expansion, but uThermal's did. So uThermal gets up his fourth base at the other location. It's not going to be too bad, but just this minor little note in terms of economy.
Well, this is the big deal. Oh my gosh.
Oh no. Okay.
And that's the kind of thing that happens when you're facing a guy that you haven't beaten in a year and a half. Like anybody else, that's a fine pathway, but now he's going to land. The tanks are already in position. Keep in mind, this is just his third, and as you pointed out, Fear Dragon, the fourth for uThermal is already going down. And in TvT, exchanging is fine as long as it's mostly equitable. So uThermal's got this force here, and if at best souL dislodges it and kills it, the exchange is still favorable for uThermal because he's expanding more aggressively behind this, and he's stopped him from mining here. Just a fantastic move from the Dutchman.
Yeah, he is a bit behind on some of those upgrades. One finished up for souL, so if the Marines are able to engage just directly versus other Marines without the siege tanks interfering, souL's probably going to be taking slightly more favorable trades. Dropping out the Cyclones to try and absorb the damage from uThermal siege tanks. It kind of works out. Is it going to be enough? It looks like it will.
It is, but I mean, look at the supply. It's not massively in favor of uThermal, but just the fact that he did this kind of damage, slowed him down that bad, and then came out ahead again, just kind of compounds the issue. So like you said, souL's got the slight upgrade advantage, and that's going to be his edge. But even then, he lost a decent chunk of his Marine count, and it's just uThermal that's picking the battles right now. And as long as that trend continues, I don't see souL emerging victorious here. It's going to be really hard to get above that water.
Yeah, he has a window of opportunity, and it is going to be closing rapidly as uThermal just gets further and further ahead. But the double medevac's going to keep souL maybe a little bit more on the defensive. I like that the sensor towers are going to be able to spot this out, but uThermal just even having the threat of the drops is going to be enough.
Right. The threat is actually damage in and of itself. For a second, it was looking like he was going to die. You gotta be kidding me, but okay. So this Liberator's going to find a little bit of purchase, get a couple SCV kills here.
Yeah.
souL is 11 SCVs behind, but little moves like this are kind of nice.
Yeah, Marines will eventually clean that up, so not too bad. souL actually going for the low ground expansion. This is kind of a nice move, just to even ignore that pocket expansion, realizing, hey, I got to play a bit of catch up here. So.
Yep, he's going to have to try and keep finding ways to do just that, because when, in a mirror matchup of any kind, really, but especially in TvT, I feel, when you fall behind economically, and because it's such an aggressive matchup, and there's not like unique tech paths for the most part, especially when both players are doing this, right? So in PvP and ZvZ, sometimes there's one guy going Ravagers, and then the other guy's going Disruptors, but in this case, they both have Marines, they both have tanks, and that's kind of what they're dealing with. Slight mistake. It's TvT, don't worry. That was just like 8 supply.
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize it.
He does see that the army is moving forward, so he can relocate his own siege tanks in a nice spot.
He only got 2, though.
Oh, wait a second. He only has 3 on the map. This is a really big problem. I don't think that's going to be enough to hold back uThermal.
uThermal's just going to crush forward here. Senses weakness and is going to pounce. The 2 tanks of the 3 are now gone. The base never to be seen. And uThermal is still floating just about 40 supply above his opponent. The scan to make sure there's no doom drop, but I mean, why even bother? After crushing that kind of victory, he can just siege down here and say, okay, well, I'm up a base, and it's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah, I mean, the supply on army is actually misleading because it's just 11 medevacs eating up supply and only a handful of Marines and 2 siege tanks.
Yeah.
So uThermal is just drastically further ahead than his opponent.
Yep. And then from this position, you can see he's already hitting one of the factories. I do like the Vikings coming out for souL. It has that too little, too late vibe to it. Like you said, a lot of his supply is medevacs. He's starting to get some tools out here. And I feel like, my job as a caster, like, well, what if, if uThermal loads up his whole army and really just throws it into the teeth of those Marines, then that's how he can come back, I guess. But any kind of attack from souL is going to be an exchange with a guy that is already ahead. And that's just that kind of raw grind math is tough.
Okay, so souL gonna try and load up 3 medevacs and maneuver around the army to try and... This is okay. Oh, this is really cute. So he's gonna unload over here at the gold so he can try and come in for a flank. I was gonna say either that or just try and go for counter damage. One of the two can sometimes pull you back in a game, but... it just means that he has even fewer units back at home to defend.
Yeah, just any fight. Any fight. I mean, like I said, unless uThermal really gets sloppy. But he's not. He found weakness, and like you're pointing out for Dragon, I think souL had to try something risky to try and get some kind of leg up here. But the just tank line itself, and there's some tanks from souL, but they're a little bit out of position. uThermal kind of waffling. He's like, can I fight that? He goes, I guess I can. He's going to run on top of it.
Yeah.
But the tank's already killed the Marine. souL is going to tap out, and uThermal finds a way to win.
Indeed he does, going up 1-0 in our first TvT of the day. And this is, I guess, him maintaining that lead where he still has not dropped a map to souL in over a year and a half.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the beginnings of why. I mean, not to extrapolate too much from this. Best of threes are pretty brief, but it just, you know, uThermal just kept him on his half the map and was just mauling him after the opening. souL tried to do some kind of clever stuff to punish the opening, but just everything he did. I mean, we even talked about the Hellions and Reapers. I was like, okay, but not really that significant of damage. And when a guy goes CC first, if you don't kill close to like 10 SCVs, you're pretty far behind from there, and the numbers kind of showed that.
Yeah, TvT is also just such an, I want to just say, like, it's such an impressive matchup to have a dominating win rate over someone with, because I feel like it's going to be such a volatile matchup. You saw things like souL ready to load up 4 or 5 medevacs and probably boosting straight over to the main base, but the fact that he's able to maintain that really good vision out on the map, to have those units, I think he got a little bit lucky with that kind of parading out where he caught the units, but he still had a lot of those sensor towers going up fairly early. He just seemed to have a good sense of the game, and that's how you avoid, I think, getting caught off guard in TvT, positional play.
I'm going to give you a healthy dose of the devil's advocate and say I disagree. I think TvT is a matchup where if one player is better than the other, it's very difficult to win. I think in PvP you do have a lot of RNG. I think in ZVZ, the Zerg players, if they're to be believed, will tell you there's a ton of RNG. But in TvT, while RNG of course exists, I think it is one of the matchups where if you're just better than your opponent, the path to victory is really, really tough. The cheese in TvT is harder to get that win off of, I think. But you know what, Fear Dragon, you could be right. You're a smart guy, and I'm only kind of lucky every once in a while.
Well, I feel like that's a lot of us, but don't worry about it. We're going to be starting down in the bottom right of our next map. It's going to be Catalyst for game number 2. On top of this guy, it's going to be a red Terran player sitting down 0-1, but not giving up heart just yet. It's souL.
Did you say heart? There's a perfect opportunity to say heart and souL.
Heart and souL?
Isn't that beautiful? And he's such a cheery guy, too. Very positive.
Oh, yeah. Very positive on Twitter.
Yeah. On the top left-hand side, enjoying yet another victory against this poor guy from the Netherlands. It's uThermal. Hopefully somewhere, my dream is that somewhere out there, there's a Kevin Rotterdam Vanderkoy just watching and just being so happy because his boy is on his way to possibly facing off with Mr. Nurchio. And that would be a great little matchup there.
Oh, I mean, that's a battle of the two kings of Europe. I mean, you got arguably one of the better Zerg players in Europe, and you got arguably the best Terran player in Europe facing off against each other in that winner's match, potentially. But souL's not going to give up. And if there's one thing I have to say about souL, I'm going to be totally blunt about this. souL sometimes gets on my nerves. He's like the guy that no tournament organizer or admin really wants to deal with, because he's always the guy that is like nitpicking at all the rules and everything. But the one thing I have to say about him is that he is a very hardworking guy. He is always looking for opportunities to improve. He's always grinding out those games. And the reason why he participates in so many online cups is because he's just constantly looking for opportunities to play in high pressure situations. So he's one player that I expect to just constantly get better, and whenever he loses, he's driven to get better even more.
He's opinionated, Fear Dragon.
He is opinionated.
He's got an opinion, and he wants people to know about it. You know, for the young people to do that, I feel it's good. uThermal's going to fall back in this game number 2 on a little bit more of a standard opening. We'll have to see how it shapes up, but souL, kind of interestingly enough, reactionary to the first game, is also going to open up with a similar opening. Obviously, well, not necessarily obviously, but I guess we probably won't see a starport on the other side of the map. Catalyst is a little bit of a map that a lot of people talk about in terms of being a very hyper-aggressive map. You kind of expand, you take a third, and then your fourth base is either stretching you way far away from your main base, or it's getting you closer to your opponent by a lot. So look for, I would guess, probably, I mean, actually, mech could be done here, but I think bio, just to get the blood flowing.
Yeah, and I like that we actually have pretty cool reactions from both these players. uThermal is just scouting around the map, just looking for that proxy starport you were mentioning before, not seeing it. And actually, we got to see souL move halfway across the map, saw, wait a second, your Reaper's not meeting me in the middle of the map. And then he goes around and checks and says, okay, wait a second, are you up to shenanigans? But neither of them find anything.
It's one of the fun aspects of WCS Challengers. It's got so much on the line, but best of threes are just such short, darn matchups. So all the importance kind of compacted into this means that if one player cheeses the other or gets away with a cheeky CC first, then there's this weird standoff where they're not quite sure. Look at that, just the bad timing. I mean, that again, that's what uThermal's got over him. It's not going to end up being the biggest of deals, but just the timing of that is so hilariously bad for souL.
Yeah, and I mean, even just the delay on this command center building, it's an extra, what, 9-10 seconds? We think about that's an extra almost SCV produced. That's a little bit of extra mining time.
I mean, yeah, but there's those kind of waves are rippling throughout the entire match. I mean, the funny thing is just the mental attrition that probably happens where souL literally, his Reaper just hopped off the cliff and uThermal's just hopped up it. If he waits one more second, he gets the jump on those two Reapers and they both die for free. Or close to it, at least.
Okay, well, Cyclone's out for uThermal right around the time that souL Cyclone just popped out.
There. See, that's fine. That timing's cool.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, okay, so he is building the tech lab already. He's going to be immediately moving into those siege tanks, but uThermal did invest in the second Cyclone, so he might be able to deny this for a little longer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got a medevac coming out here, so the idea for souL was he wanted to drop, and he is going to go for the drop, but in doing so, the units back at home are not enough to, I mean, like literally the two Cyclones are exactly what can shut down a Cyclone plus a couple Marines or something like that. So this drop has to do damage, and if it does, I mean, it's just 6 Marines too, then look at what has happened in the matchup. You'll see it reflected in those workers and in the army, probably. I mean, everything.
All right, 4 Cyclones now out for uThermal, so he has some defenses back at home, even has a couple of Marines. Okay, supply depots might be a little bit more vulnerable.
What is with the supply depots and TvTs, guys? We had it yesterday in the North American. Like, look at this. It's just, yeah, okay, you set it on fire, and you are going to lose everything?
Oh, boy. That medevac! Oh, the last shot gets it. He might get a Cyclone in exchange for it. No, the Cyclone's going to get out of there alive, isn't it?
Yeah, that thing's got, like, 6 gears, man. It can go upwards of 25 miles per hour. Marines, do you know how fast they run?
15?
24.
20. Oh, that's pretty fast.
I just made that up. I don't know what it is, but they're pretty quick.
Yeah.
They have, like, an enhanced musculature.
Do you think they actually run faster? Is that like a lore thing that they run faster?
Absolutely, they do, and they're convicts.
That I do know. And everyone
gotta run faster if you're a convict. But here's this push. It's going to be a single tank, and this is, I do like this. I guess the reason I just kind of already have my squinty-eyed skepticism is just that the first drop really did nothing. So there's the tank being revealed. There's no gases there. Well, hey.
Your tank.
Yeah, if uThermal wants to get sloppy, then all of a sudden this gets to do something.
Yeah, losing his first siege tank is really annoying because that's just going to put him behind on the tank count for a little bit. Cyclone, overextending a little bit.
Oh my god. Well, our Eurobros probably are not familiar with a American dish called a Sloppy Joe, but it's a wonderful burger-like meal to eat, but it is sloppy, and both those players put on a display of just that.
He has enough energy for a scan, but he just doesn't have the Marines to actually do anything about this Banshee, even if he did scan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's frustrating. The
bad gets worse, and Mr. Tread's going to try to go down to the natural, but uThermal is a patient hunter, and now, look at this. It even just took this shot from the mine. It's going to kill that tank. 20-plus supply advantage. This natural's still not getting mined, and because, as Fear Dragon pointed out, the first few Marines already died, and oh, man. Someone call the police. This is...
Oh, this is brutal.
This is, yeah. Okay, uThermal says we're done. And that's it, 2-0. And you know what? Gracefully, I will say it, the silver lining, TvTs could go on for like 4.5 hours. The last 2 days have been about 15 minutes.
Yeah,
about 350.
You definitely called it. We ended up seeing uThermal taking a pretty dominating stance in that series, really shutting down souL, who I really do think is a good player, but it just goes to show you that uThermal is looking so in form right now.
Well, I mean, it's one of those sick matchups, and this kind of harkens back to Need versus Epic yesterday, where it just kind of felt like, on paper, one of the guys was at a supreme disadvantage. And this gets tough for souL, by the way, story-wise for the group. He's probably, at best, hoping uThermal beats Nurchio, and then souL has to win his match to then face Nurchio, who's no slouch, by the way. Nurchio is one of the winningest players in all of non-Korea, but certainly in Europe. He's amazing.
Yeah, and also, I'm just going to say, souL's record versus Nurchio is also not that great. He is in series score 30-5. So,
but he's won.
He has won. You know, he did actually win one series versus uThermal. Funny enough, it was in 2013. He won his very first series that he played versus uThermal, and then he never won another one after that.
I mean, to be fair, by the way, we've been spending a lot of time talking about how
Yeah.
bad this matchup is. uThermal's been very good for a long time, so
Yeah.
it's rough for souL. These are rough stats, but uThermal and Nurchio, it's like if you're going to lose to somebody, those are two pretty good players to lose to. So he's hoping for a miracle, but he's got life still. No one's eliminated yet.
Indeed. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hop to a short break before we get into our next series. You guys are watching WCS EU Challenger, and we'll be back with souL versus Clem in a little bit.